What if scientists have been hiding the greatest threat to humanity? I'm Ruth Leedy Carr, and for over 40 years, evidence has mounted of a coming polar shift, a secret buried in the words of Asimov and Sagan, and in the mysterious glowing poles of a hollow Mars.
Hello, folks. My name is Ruth Leedy Carr, and I have been working on the research regarding the shifting of the poles on what I believe is a hollow Earth since 1980. And I was trained in journalism at Indiana University, and I did aspire to become a science writer, but then I somehow got sidetracked into piano teaching. But then when I came across this topic of a coming axis shift in the prophecies of Edgar Cayce, I became, you might say, hooked, and I started researching because there was a geologist quoted in the book, Edgar Cayce, The Sleeping Prophet by Jess Stern. The geologist was quoted as saying, yes, Cayce was right, there will be an axis shift, and he said the reason is that we are overdue for a reversal of the Earth's magnetic field, and that this is going to result in an axis shift. And he didn't exactly explain why a reversal of the field should result in an axis shift, but I was able to come up with the obvious answer. It's the fact that the solar wind, which is an extremely powerful outside force, is going to strike the new magnetic poles, which will be established as a result of the field reversal. In other words, when the Earth's magnetic field has decayed sufficiently, the new magnetic poles will arise in opposite hemispheres. The new north magnetic pole will arise somewhere in the present southern hemisphere, and the new south magnetic pole will arise somewhere in the present northern hemisphere. And that the solar wind will be diverted by the shape of the magnetic field, just as happens now. The magnetic field's shape diverts the solar wind to the magnetic poles, and the solar wind is thus funneled to hit those spots in the north and the south. And this force defines the axis and also has the effect of powering rotation. And the reason it can perform both those functions is that there's a hole at the pole which prevents the solar wind from striking exactly at the axis. You can't strike exactly at the axis if there's no land there. But anyway, when the new magnetic poles are established and the solar wind starts striking in those new places, it's going to be inevitable that the axis will shift so that the new north magnetic pole, the new pole of rotation, will be the same or very close to the new north magnetic pole, and vice versa in the south. I believe the Cayce prophecies indicate that the new south pole will be located in northern Europe. That's what the prophecies indicate, but the prophecy states the upper portion of Europe will be changed as in the twinkling of an eye, and that was the most dramatic prophecy for any part of the world in Cayce's prophecies. And I believe that Cayce's prophecies are supported by material that has been provided by Isaac Asimov and Carl Sagan, but it's very difficult for me to prove that quickly because it involves studying their riddles. However, the whole question of whether the Earth is hollow is a lot easier to prove. It's a lot easier to prove that there are holes in the poles than it is to prove exactly where the new holes will be located. But I can prove that there are holes in the poles of Mars, and that's extremely easy to prove because there's a great deal of photographic evidence to that effect. And we have NASA to thank for that, even though NASA will not admit that the lighted South Pole is on the night side. You can't get NASA to admit that on the record. I mean, my congressman wrote a letter to NASA, and they refused to comment on that question. However, anyone can see that the lighted South Pole is on the night side if they analyze the photograph. And there are 4 photographs that can be studied. The first one is in Space, Science, and Astronomy, edited by Thornton and Lou Williams Page. And you want to look for the photo that was taken on August 4th, 1969, by the Mariner 7 probe. And then the second photo in this series is from Patrick Moore's Guide to Mars, the 1978 edition. And once again, it's a photo taken on August the 4th, 1969, very shortly after this first one that was mentioned. Now, the third one in this series is found in the Encyclopedia Britannica of 1974. And you can see the progression of the landmark Olympus Mons. It starts out sort of in a little bit left of center, and then it progresses to the right and farther to the right. And then the fourth picture in this series is from Pictorial Guide to the Planets, written by Joseph Jackson. And that's on the title page. Now, for that picture, you can't see the sun's bright reflection on the right side. The sun's bright reflection on the right side is the key to understanding the picture. So when the sun is coming in, that bright reflection should be halfway up, indicating that the sunlight is coming in horizontally, because we think of the solar system as being level, and when you look at the picture and you see that the sun's bright reflection is well above the equator, that really is portraying the entire solar system as being tilted, as though the sun were shining down from a higher level. And that makes it hard to understand the picture, because we think of the solar system as being level. So you should, if you want to understand the picture, you need to turn the picture so that the sun's bright reflection on the side is halfway up. And then, and this is most clearly seen in the Britannica photo, because the reason is that the reflection is very close to the edge of the image. And so in order to find how far the day side can extend, all you need to do is go 90 degrees from that reflection point. 90 degrees up will take you to the north end of the lighted perimeter, and then 90 degrees clockwise will take you down to the south side of the image, and you'll find that the day side has to end right at the right edge of the lighted so-called polar cap. Well, so then that raises the question: if the day side has ended when you've barely reached the right side of the polar cap, what is it that's causing the rest of the polar cap to be eliminated? And this is an extremely important question for us, which NASA or some government agency should be answering for us. And yet, when my congressman referred some of my materials to NASA for their comment as far as the illumination of the pole on the night side, NASA refused to comment. And their grounds for refusing to comment was the fact that they have a policy against commenting on theories that are proposed by members of the public, what they called speculative lay concepts submitted by members of the public. Well, this was not speculative. This was an analysis of the picture. I wasn't speculating. I determined how far the day side could extend, and the day side can only extend, at the perimeter, the day side can only extend 180 degrees as the planet is going through phases, just as the same as when the moon is going through phases. The perimeter is illuminated for 180 degrees, regardless of whether it's a crescent moon or a half moon or a three-quarters phase. The edge, you get exactly 180 degrees of illumination at the very edge, and that's how you can be sure that the day side ends at the right edge of the polar cap. And this is so very obvious that after a great many years of thought about it, I finally concluded that there's no way to look at this other than that NASA provided these pictures to us to enable us to see that Mars is hollow. Even though they were somehow prevented from telling us that Mars is hollow, they were somehow able to provide us these pictures. And I've got to warn you that the day-night border should be showing at the right edge of the polar cap. But in each one of these pictures, the day-night border has been obscured. In the first two, it's been obscured by blackness somehow. But in the third picture, the entire expanse of the southern hemisphere above the so-called polar cap has been painted gray. So in other words, the technique for fooling you into thinking that the day-night border is not there, the technique used in the Britannica photo is different from the technique used in the Page photo and the Moore photo. That's a tip-off that retouching was done, and it was done in a different way for the third photo. And then for the fourth photo, the technique was similar to the technique used for the third photo. In the third photo, the Britannica photo, what they did was they made an extremely light copy of the Mars photo, and that allowed them to darken the background sky underneath the picture to give the impression that the day side, that the edge, that the perimeter is visible underneath the polar cap. Well, that's absolutely untrue because that's much farther away from the sun's bright reflection than 90 degrees, and if you allow for the perimeter to be illuminated that far, you've got well over 180 degrees of illumination, more like 230, and a planet the perimeter can't be illuminated for that far. It can only be illuminated either 180 degrees, or in full phase it goes to 360 degrees. There's no in between. There's no point at which 230 degrees of the perimeter is visible, and yet in this picture that's what you see. So this Mars evidence is, in my opinion, the strongest evidence that a planet can be hollow. And once we accept the fact that Mars is hollow, once we evaluate that evidence and accept it, it should be revealed rather quickly that this also applies to Earth. We don't have photographs that are that dramatic, indicating that Earth is hollow. The most popular one appeared in the tabloid The Sun on February 25th, 1992, and it shows, it's a composite photograph of the North Polar region of the Earth, showing an apparent hole at the pole. But the trouble is, the hole doesn't show any evidence of a central sun around which the shell is in orbit. And without that evidence of the central sun's light, the hole could be just dismissed as the shadow of polar night, north polar light, lack of light in the wintertime. And that's what the authorities have said. They've said, well, it looks like a hole, but it's actually just a shaded area caused by a lack of illumination in the wintertime. So that photograph doesn't really prove anything. It just takes away our attention from the evidence of the Mars photographs, which is conclusive. There are a couple of photographs of Earth that are a little bit helpful in the Page book, that show possible light on the night side. But the other points I would like to make are about recent discoveries. NASA has discovered a distant planet shaped like a collapsed football. And it seems to me that a planet isn't going to assume that shape unless it was hollow to begin with. And this was announced last summer, 2024. And another piece of evidence along this line is the fact that powerful earthquakes cause the entire planet Earth to ring like a bell, according to several authors, and I can't cite them right now, but the vibration of the very, very powerful earthquake travels around the planet in the same way that the vibration of a ringing bell travels around the bell, and a bell, of course, is hollow, and so it's really doubtful that a solid Earth would have the same type of vibration as a hollow bell. And another thing that could be mentioned is the fact that very few authorities have actually admitted that the reversing of Earth's field is imminent and that it is going to involve a shift in the axis. And yet, CBS reported on January 20th, 2000, that an ancient reversal of Earth's magnetic field did result in a tremendous difference in the latitude of the area now known as Washington, D.C. In other words, the equator moved, which obviously they said the Earth rolled. But what it really means, if the equator moved, that means the axis shifted. And they carefully avoided the term axis shift, which is one reason the public didn't really latch onto that story. They should have. But this event could come at any time, according to Jeremy Bloxham and David Gubbins in their article, The Evolution of the Earth's Magnetic Field from Scientific American, December 1989, in which they said, if there is a new hotspot or core spot appearing around the area of Indonesia, this in itself, the appearance of this hotspot, could trigger an immediate reversal of Earth's field. And they point out that two previous hotspots traveled over to the either side of the southern portion of Africa in recent centuries, and that these hotspots have reversed lines of force of magnetic field, indicating that as they get stronger and stronger in their reversed magnetism, they are counteracting the declining magnetic field that we have now, the declining magnetism of the present magnetic field. So if a third hotspot comes along with reverse magnetism, that would really be, shall we say, the final straw that would cause the entire field of Earth to reverse itself. At least that's what Bloxham and Gubbins said in their article. This statement was not highlighted. It was in fine print, and so it didn't cause a sensation. And one reason it didn't cause a sensation was that they didn't admit that this whole process is going to shift the axis. And yet, if you put together the reports of different experts, that's the conclusion you have to come to. For instance, there are authorities who will tell you that the geographic poles have wandered in the same way in more or less the same way as the magnetic poles over time, over past centuries, that the polar wandering of the magnetic poles has been on a parallel course with the polar wandering of the geographic poles. And what that is really saying, that's a fancy way of saying that every time the magnetic poles move, the axis has to move in response. And as a result of solar wind pressure at the new magnetic poles. I'm just saying that they're trying to tell you something in fancy language, which you're not supposed to know about. You're not supposed to know that the axis is going to shift, and the reason is that there's a cover-up emanating from within the Earth. That's one of the harder things to prove, because I really can't get any direct information out of the center of the Earth. But I just think that that's where the cover-up has to be coming from. That our own scientists would not willingly withhold all this information from us. That they've been trying to get it out over the years. I'm going to say that there's a lot more that could be said here, but I'm probably running out of time. My website is ruthleedycarr.com, and my social media page is under Ruth Leedy Carr on Facebook. Well, thank you, folks, for listening to this presentation, and next week we'll get a little more specific about which areas of the world are expected to be affected by the coming shift in the axis. My website is at ruthleedycarr.com, and my Facebook page, social media page, is on Facebook under Ruth Leedy Carr. And my books, Polar Hole Light in Europe's Clouds and Tipping Point for a Hollow Earth, are available on Amazon. I've enjoyed talking to you, and I hope you've enjoyed listening. Thank you very much.